Why are civic science scholars and practitioners tuning into the CivicSciTV network?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, great question.
That's a good one.
That's a great question.
Oh, that's such a great question.
CivicSciTV. Top experts, great questions, new insights.
Mapping the ongoing work across the civic science landscape by characterizing the why, what, how, who, when, and where through talking directly with practitioners in academia, government, for-profit, and non-profit organizations. I'm Fanuel Muindi, and this is Questions of the Day.
Previously on Questions of the Day.
Accuracy, right, in the designing of exhibits. So scientists are first. And the second group, are the public ever involved in that exhibit design stage?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. So as far as the subject matter expertise, so I serve as one of the subject matter experts. And what we do though is when there's areas that we want to make sure that are accurate, that aren't within our wheelhouse, because I oversee a team of content specialists who help create content as well for this exhibit. But we're so lucky to have our own astronomer on staff who has been able to serve as a subject matter expert for this exhibit as well. So we've been really lucky to have that expertise on staff. But in the event that we don't necessarily have that expertise on staff, we have a number of universities and professors that we've worked with.
Subscribe to access that conversation and many more.
So today we talk with Dr. Emily Costa, who is a Civic Science Associate at the Rockefeller University's RockEDU program. Now, you may recall us chatting with Jeannie Garbarino not long ago, Dr. Jeannie Garbarino, who is the Executive Director of RockEDU. Now, Emily and her team at ComSciCon recently got a grant to fund a collection of case studies looking at how researchers are exploring the ethical dimensions of their research and engaging the public about it. Now, what really excited me to talk with her was that they just got this grant, and so they are right at the beginning. They haven't actually done the work yet, and so it's really the right time to engage them, to understand what they are actually trying to do and what they hope to learn. You may recall us doing the same thing with JP Flores, who got a grant, micro grant from Research America. So I'm really excited to see the results of this work once data starts coming in. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation and tune back in, because we're going to have Emily back after the project concludes. Enjoy the conversation. Emily Costa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
Now, I want to know if this is true, okay? I want to know if this is true. So apparently, in one April evening in Manhattan, okay, you asked two neuroscientists whom you had on stage, okay? You asked this question. Are you ready?
Sure.
The question was, do sea sponges have nervous systems, right? This is part of your science comedy podcast. And so this is part of the grapevine. I want to know if this is true, and tell us the story.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So this was a previous April. So I'm trying to remember, but yes, from my recollection from this fact that I definitely had researched and fact checked and knew very well at the time, is that they don't, but we believe they once did. And we believe that over time, those nervous system cells evolved to become cells in their gut. So it was a little bit of a gotcha question, but those are my favorite. The ones that you don't expect the answer and then find yourself learning something new and really interesting and curiosity sparking.
Yeah, and then this was part of your science comedy podcast, right? At that time that you were building. So because I asked this question partly to just get a little bit of background to how you got into civic science and all the jazz around it. Can you share a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is from my past and current science comedy show and podcast called Fax Machine. It is a show, as we like to say, by and for people who are curious about everything, but especially the things that make them laugh. So we are a science comedy and storytelling show. We've been around since, I was corrected on this recently, I think 2018. So we've been running for a while. We started out as a podcast and now do shows on a monthly basis at a venue called Caveat in the Lower East Side in New York City. it's a blast. But yeah, that was something that I started in grad school with two of my closest friends from grad school. So it's hosted by three scientists who are also massive nerds and like to laugh about both of those things. And my pathway into civic science definitely was through science communication. In graduate school, I studied cancer biology. So I did my thesis studying lung adenocarcinoma. And that is, by studying something that is so clinically translatable, you're already feeling pretty close to the patients that you're studying and the people. So I always kind of was very conscious of this sort of human element of science as I was doing my research. And it was something that I really loved about it. And over the course of graduate school, I kind of figured out that my considerations about that, and also just how much I enjoy writing and podcasting and speaking and talking about science. All of those things together led me to be really interested in work that was at this intersection of thinking about how we do science so that it can benefit the most people possible as much as possible, starting from the process of science and also thinking about how science eventually translates to outcomes in our broader society. And truly at the very end of grad school, through knowing Jeannie Garbarino, who is the executive director of RockEDU, and talking to her towards the end of grad school about this position that I now currently have coming up, I basically learned from her that this word, for all of the work and research that I read about in grad school, also while reading my thesis research papers, but like alongside, was actually called civic science. Like it was like a huge aha moment of like, oh, there's a name. There's a name for this work that I've been obsessing over and that I think is the coolest thing ever. And so that's how I got here. But Fax Machine is still continuing, which is great.
Fax Machine, and we'll share the link below. I share this enthusiasm and energy, Emily. So I was reading recently, and so there was a piece by Carmen Drau from the Kavli Foundation. And I want to just read you a quick thing here. So, and I quote, they, and I think I'm assuming scientists, might have vague ideas about wanting to involve people whose lives will be impacted by their research or about bouncing things off of an ethicist. But they lack the experience or role models for building these ties across fields. And your quote is saying, it's like, I want to do this, but I don't know where to start, end quote. Emily, so you are a co-PI of a brand new case study grant funded by the Kavli Foundation. And I believe that's part of the energy, right? The focus of what this project will be about. Can you tell us how this project came about, its goals, and we'll go through this part, but tell us what what's it about and the why behind it.
Yeah, so the project is called Stories of Ethics, Engagement, and Dialogue in Science, or SEEDS, which was a very intentional acronym of, we're trying to seed some new growths here, some new understanding. But the idea is that exactly as you quoted, in the sciences in general, but especially in basic and discovery science, where that research is right compared to what I was saying about my research, a little bit perhaps further removed from what its downstream applications might be someday, what technologies might go on to have as impacts on the world. It is extra difficult to try and think about, what those broader social implications and ethical implications of that research might be. But it's still very important that we think about those things and do our best to try and get a sense of them as early in the research process as possible. Because in ways that we don't even have to imagine, right? We can see them in our society right now. A lot of times, after these findings are published or the technology is already out there, we're finding ourselves seeing them shape and change the world that we live in and thinking, I like that it's doing this. I don't like so much that it's doing this. And it's a lot tougher to make those decisions and think about how we regulate certain things like this after it's already out there. So the idea behind this project is to basically talk to basic scientists, which is wonderful because they do a lot of really cool stuff. So it'd be very fun to talk to them. But specifically basic scientists who are trying to incorporate this sort of ethical dimension into their work, the folks who are thinking about this kind of stuff in terms of, what might the downstream impacts of my science, what might those impacts be? Not only just in terms of like what I find out, what I publish, what comes of the work that I'm doing, but even in terms of the process of the research itself, the questions that are being asked, how the data is being collected and analyzed, what materials are being used. as we know, like there are basic scientists out there in the world who are thinking about these things and attempting to grapple with them. What we're really interested to do is find them, talk to them, write up case studies about how they're approaching this, how they're seeking to learn more about the ethical implications, how they figure out in the first place whether there might be ethical implications of their research, and then also how they're taking these insights that they find out through whichever approach they take, and how they're bringing it back to their research in terms of thinking about how they do their research, how they think about their fields, and that kind of thing. So that's the idea. There are folks out there doing this work, and we're hoping to capture their stories, compile them, see what insights and lessons we can derive, and then share them back with the basic science community so that folks can learn from each other and take these lessons forward in their work.
Yeah, so and you answered one of my questions, who's the target audience here? So the target audience, just to be clear, are other basic scientists.
Yes. And I'll note too, a big element of this project is that we're also working really closely with early career researchers. The project itself, I should mention, is hosted by ComSciCon, which is a science communication organization that hosts SciComm workshops. At this point, internationally, we've been around since 2012. We've had over 100 workshops and served over 5,000 graduate students across the world. I'm grateful to be on the leadership team with them. I think they're awesome. But our target audience through ComSciCon is specifically early career researchers. And that's true of a part of this project as well. So talking about master's students, graduate students, and postdocs, because in our minds, they're folks who are closest to the research. So especially in terms of SciComm, like they're going to have the closest sense of what's going on at the bench because they're the ones at the bench or in the fields, lots of different research, actually doing the work. They're also closest to the communities that they came from to enter graduate school and their higher education to become prepared and trained as scientists. And they're ostensibly the folks who are the future of science. So the idea of their involvement with SEEDS as well is that we're actually working with them to write these case studies and also inviting their perspectives and their thoughts as well, because, just as they're interviewing scientists to develop these case studies, they also are coming in, as we've already seen with some of our application surveys, with their own ideas and questions and things that they're grappling with about the ethics of their own work. So we're really hoping to have this be sort of like a holistic, again, like reaching basic scientists in general, but also involving and synthesizing perspectives from early career basic scientists who, again, represent the basic scientists of the future. So it would be great if they could also carry forward these lessons in their work.
Yeah. And so we are talking really right at the beginning of this project, right? The funding is got the award, yay, congrats again, and you and your team. Tell us where you are right now in the process, right? You were talking offline that you're trying to get these case studies, people to share them. Tell us what you're setting up now and then your timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. I should note too, our work is very, thankfully, they're amazing, supported by the Kavli Foundation and the Rita Allen Foundation. That was a more recent development, so just to shout everybody out. But yes, so in terms of what we're working on right now, the project itself has a couple of moving parts, but one of them, as you mentioned, is the case studies. So there, we're right now recruiting our cohort of case study writers, and we're going to have essentially a kind of slightly less than a year-long program where we're working with them. We'll match them by fields with scientists to write a case study about. And throughout, we'll also have virtual programming and mentoring opportunities and co-working. So that's one piece that we're lining up right now. As part of this, as I mentioned, we also have virtual programming that'll be open to the public. So stay tuned for news about that. And we also have an integration with our annual ComSciCon flagship workshops, which take place in Boston. If you are a grad student who's watching this, I'm not sure when it will go out, but if it's before the end of April, the application period is still open. So go to ComSciCon.org and apply. It's a great workshop. And most of your expenses will be covered, potentially all depending on your travel, but point being, apply, it's great. And we also have some SEEDS related programming happening at the 2025 and 2026 workshop as well. So all of those things are kind of happening. Overall, this project continues until the end of 2026. But yes, for now, our main directives, and I'm actually doing a bunch of outreach for this right now, just kind of being sending a lot of emails, hoping to shake out some case studies, but essentially trying to recruit the subjects of our cases. So reaching out across scientific communities within basic science to say, hey, do you have a friend? Do you have a colleague? Have you heard a rumor about someone in your fields who has done something like, reached out to an ethicist in their institution to have a cup of coffee and run some ideas by them and try to get a better sense of the ethics of their research and whether they might exist and when to start thinking about that, or whether they've, started invited somebody in for a talk to talk about the ethical implications of their research to other folks in their fields at their institution, whether they've partnered with or created some kind of community engagement opportunity, reaching out to folks in their local communities or even folks who they think might be somewhat impacted by their research in some way, to try and expand their understanding about the ethical and social dimensions of their research. So those are the kinds of folks that we're looking for. And we're hoping to capture, I should say, too, folks at various stages of their scientific careers with various levels of experience, with kind of, as I mentioned, grappling sort of with the ethics of their research. So truly, even if it's just somebody reaching out to talk to someone outside their fields and broaden their perspective, awesome. We want to talk to you. We want to understand what motivated you to do that, what you gained from it, how you even went about finding a social scientist to talk to. So that's the part of the process that we're in right now, just trying to find a nice spectrum of basic scientists to talk to and capture their stories from.
Okay, so I would like to just dig a little deeper into these stories that you wish to capture and what do you hope to gain by talking with them? Because you talked about the ethical dimensions of their work, right? What they're doing. Can you just tell us a little bit more? What are some of the key guiding questions that you all are trying to ascertain? And then maybe also tell us the format of which you're doing these. I'm assuming these are one-on-one interviews, or are they filling out a survey? So those are two separate questions there. I hope you tell us.
Yes, absolutely. I might take the second one first. Okay. But yes, the format we're envisioning right now, at least, is they will be one-on-one interviews. And partially, we're still kind of designing the sort of template that we want to use, because we'd like to be able to make not necessarily a landscape review. There's not going to be that many case studies, but some kind of broader analysis and coding from the information that we collect. So there will be a kind of broader template of just sort of the types of information we're interested to gather. But I like the interview format because it also leaves breathing room for folks to dig deeper and ask, insightful questions that gather more information and richness around that template as well. So that was our thinking of having it be an interview format. Where each case study writer will reach out to their basic scientist and they'll coordinate that and they'll talk. I'll say too, we also want to have at least a section of the case studies include some personal narrative from the writer as well, as someone who is in the same field as their case study subject, and also actively thinking about and responding to what they're learning from their conversation with their interviewee. So that's kind of the sort of scope of how we'll go about assembling the case studies and what I will pull in conversationally. In terms of what we're really interested to capture, I will say some of what we're thinking about is very informed by the CIPEP report that was released not earlier this year, towards the end of last year.
Yep, it was the end of last year. And if you have not heard about the CIPEP report, here's a quick snippet about it.
The newly released CIPEP report, a collaborative effort by the Kavli Foundation and the Department of Energy's Office of Science, provides targeted insights for communicating basic science, curiosity-driven research that is often less familiar or immediately relatable to audiences. As the report introduction explains, the motivation behind CIPEP emerged from a lack of existing guidance tailored to sharing foundational science with the public. Unlike applied science, which has an established communication framework, basic science faces unique challenges in conveying its broader value to society. The report includes a broad spectrum of resources, drawing on expert discussions, commissioned research, and survey data. For example, one study cited in the report, led by John Besley of Michigan State, reviewed 2,300 articles from top science communication journals. This analysis found that only about 5% addressed communicating basic science topics. CIPEP's recommendations seek to address these gaps by suggesting practical, evidence-based approaches. Central to CIPEP's framework is the importance of setting clear, audience-specific goals in public communication. John Besley explains that every other decision about communication follows from these audience-specific behavioral goals, emphasizing the need for targeted objectives before selecting tactics. Social scientist Rose Hendricks adds that communicators of basic science may sometimes set unrealistic goals that are not connected with their chosen tactics. Olivia Ambrogio from the American Geophysical Union's Sharing Science program notes that people focused on basic research tend to interact with non-scientists less than their applied counterparts. Prior experience engaging with audiences enhances researchers' ability to reflect on what worked and what didn't. Historian Bruce Lewinstein provides a thought-provoking perspective, stating, "As a historian, I know that the label of basic science, and the contrast with applied science, does not describe a real distinction in science. Instead, the labels appeared in history primarily for rhetorical reasons, as part of an argument about how to treat science." His reflection in the report, titled "Why I Don't Use the Label Basic Science," challenges the traditional terminology and is an insightful read. The report has a ton of evidence-backed guidance, and all of it is very accessible alongside informative case studies that tell compelling narratives. And it comes with a slide deck with visuals of the key insights from the report. Not many reports do that.
Definitely building upon some insights there and trying to sort of extend some of the questions they were asking. But I think a lot of it is going to be based on process, because the perk of case studies is you're able to capture how folks are doing whatever work you're interested in the real world, under the present conditions, what the challenges are, what the benefits are, what the impacts are. So we're really interested to know, like, again, like a big one is, when are folks starting to even have this thought at all of like, wait a minute, so I'm drafting this next grant, I'm submitting this, and I have this going on. I talked to my student about their project. I see this going on over here. I wonder if there could be something that I should be thinking about my project that might actually have broader impacts than that I hadn't considered before. Like, when does that even idea seed in their mind? Right, to start kind of questioning that. So when in the process, and the neat thing too is we're talking to folks from a bunch of different fields. So I'd imagine these cues will look different for different fields too. So we need to capture that. So that's a big piece. And then, like, for folks who have that realization, are like, ooh, I should probably understand this a bit better so I can think about it more, and maybe think about it in terms of my research specifically. Then what do they once they want to try and understand it more, especially with the idea of like talking to folks outside of their fields. Like I know personally from someone who spent like some time, again, not knowing what civic science was, not knowing it had a name, and from the outside kind of like seeing folks doing some of this, stellar public engagement work and policy work and all the different manifestations of civic science that we call civic science, and seeing those folks and being, your work is so cool, and I'd love to learn more from them, and I'd love to learn how you do that work. I'm a cancer biologist. I don't know who to talk to. You know what I mean? So how do folks undertake that step of finding the person to talk to and connecting with them? What does that end up looking like? Is it a conversation? Is it someone that they form a more longitudinal relationship with? Do they become a collaborator on a grant? That'd be really neat if we capture that kind of thing happening. And then also, considering all of the different, again, like activities that we're kind of classifying, that we're classifying within our case studies is like things we're looking to capture. So, multidisciplinary like engagements, community engagements, networking within your fields to try and like deepen your understanding. For folks who undertake any of these things, how does it impact them? How does it impact their research? Do they take these insights back and change up their research plans, or like add a more continuous community engagement element so that they can continue iterating on these ideas as they continue to form? That's what we're really interested to capture. So it's truly like across the entire process, from the very beginning of just, there might be some ethical implications here, and I should maybe do something about it, to what doing something about it actually looks like in the end.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that last point. The anchor in this, tell me if I'm wrong, is the ethical dimension, right, of their work. So it's not just you're doing public engagement, but have you thought about the ethical sort of dimensions of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's, I guess to be more precise, because public engagement is like a pretty large and kind of like encompassing term for like various different types of activities. We're specifically looking for public engagement that is two-way, that is more dialogue based. So not just going out into the community and saying, hey, I'm in the park and this is my science, and ask me questions about it, which is great. But we're interested in folks, especially who are saying, hey, this is my science. This is how I'm thinking about it. What do you think about this? How do you respond to this? There's some really cool, we're actually going to meet with them pretty soon, but projects happening at the Kavli Center for Society, Ethics, and the Public out in Cambridge in the UK. They have some really cool public initiatives that kind of try to address this, particularly around AI. So we're definitely interested to learn, from organizations like them and other places how this is playing out, but that's kind of more precisely what we imagine in terms of the public or community engagement element. Something that is two-way, such that engagement is directly informing the researcher and the research.
Yeah, and then you focus on basic scientists, and I'm glad you brought up the SciPep report because in there, Bruce Lewinstein, I hope I said that right. He corrected me last time. He was talking about the lines are blurry, right? Even in our own previous workshop where I was at with him, lines are blurry. What's basic and what isn't? Is that useful to mention? But you brought up like AI, right? In this case, because I think I was going to ask you can you some examples. I'm assuming another one, like CRISPR, for example, all these emerging technologies, right? That do have ethical dimensions. We have had folks who are doing also quantum science, right? A whole like quantum science engagement. In fact, there's a whole like little work that is taking place at that scale. So can you speak a little bit to that? This terminology, you use basic scientists. Who are you specifically looking for when you use that terminology?
Yeah, speaking of grappling, I have also been grappling, but personally with that element of this quite a bit since the project started, because I think like exactly as you mentioned, it's hard to put like very strict sort of boundaries on like what basic science is versus applied, and then we have translational over here, and then I think clinical is pretty safely not basic, but clinical research has its origins in basic places. It's all about studying molecules and what they do in our cells. And oftentimes we're looking at that in yeast and in fruit flies. And like, those are models still for ideally like human systems way down the line, but it's still understanding basic biology that eventually has after effects, to be something more translational towards human health. So I think I do agree that drawing those lines is difficult. But I think what we're ultimately looking for is situations where the pathways to kind of readily engage with these sort of broader impacts of your research are not as well established. Like certainly for folks who are doing more clinically aligned research. The NIH I know has a longstanding like history of like having various programs that support community-based participatory research, particularly around issues of like health equity. We see this quite a bit as well with like rare disease or rare cancer research, where if you're studying a small population of people with a disease, then you have to work with them more closely, even just to reach out to them and have that research take place. So I think in particular for more like medically aligned research, some of those pathways to start addressing these issues and concerns are a bit more established. What we're really interested in is capturing folks who like as scientists, like actively like in the lab doing the work, how they're themselves reaching out to try and carve these opportunities to develop this deeper understanding and respond to it. So still a bit nebulous. I will note that from our support from the Kavli Foundation, we are doing some in-reach among the institutes, just like from their suggestion, and we're like, oh, it's a pool of basic scientists. I don't know any, so we can ask them. So from that, we're definitely looking at folks in astronomy, neuroscience, nanoscience, but we're also looking much beyond that as well. And I will say, like from personal experience, I'm very excited about how much science I'm going to get to learn about through this project, a bit selfishly, but also like in the same place, kind of trying to, from my perspective, like figure out where to draw those lines, especially on like the biomedical science side. Because as I found out from talking to folks about this project, and also with my collaborators at ComSciCon who are on the team with me for this project, namely Harshal Kamdar, Meredith Schmel, and Nathan Sanders. We have a neuroscientist there and 2 astrophysicists. So their definitions compared to mine of what basic science is also very different. So I think we're kind of trying to follow sort of like the story that we can capture, and kind of letting that lead the way more so than the very specific slices of basic science.
Yeah, but I think this is the key, right? We're talking with you at the beginning of this project,
Yes.
right? And I want to say this up before I forget that we would love to have you back actually once you sort of get towards closer to the conclusion of the project, maybe once the case studies are out, because we want to know like what are some of those key insights, right? And key themes that emerge from this work. So that is an open invitation. Please do come back.
That'd be great. Awesome.
And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done, right? What is the timeline for this project right now? When do you assume that you'll be able to get to a point where you have something published?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So our granting period is until the end of 2020, so December 2026. So the way we have it planned out is our writing period where we have our cohort enrolled and we're running that program. Will start next fall until like later next spring. And then they're kind of like sort of capstone event will actually be our annual ComSciCon flagship workshop, but the one in 2026. That typically happens in July. And then essentially the remaining work, from then until the end of the granting period will just be then on the back end with the organizing team and the folks that we're working with as editors and writers for the final manuscript, putting those case studies together, doing some coding and analysis to prepare a final publication.
Yeah. And I like this dual function, right? You have this sort of cohort type, right? You're going to bring these writers, right? These science writers together, and they're the ones who are actually going to be engaging, right, with those scientists in collaboration with you, right? Guidance in terms of who to reach out to, and so forth. And then, as you mentioned earlier, that their own insights will be included, right, in terms of what they got out from those interviews and so forth. I think that's really fascinating as a dimension, right? It's not like you all are doing the interviews. In fact, you have a cohort of people that you're hiring, right?
Yes.
And they are also part of this process.
Yeah, I mean, as coming at this as ComSciCon, our instinct and our kind of like motivating flame, our North Star is always, focusing on the folks that we always like to work with, our target audience of early career researchers. And just from being involved with them for a bunch of years and going to conferences, and also speaking personally, there are lots of early career researchers who are really excited by science communication and looking for opportunities to practice it and develop those skills. And we're hoping that this can be a way for our writers to do that. We'll have, appointed editors to work with them, to support them. They'll have a network of support throughout the course of the program. And hopefully through that, they can get some valuable science communication training and experience. And also at the end have contributed to what I think and hope will be a really insightful and meaningful manuscript for the fields. So it felt a little bit like a no-brainer to just, bring in our favorite folks and work together with them to make something great.
Yeah. So you will also be looking for the science writers. Will there be an application process or something like that for them?
Yes. Yeah. So it already kind of started and we're continuing. It's sort of like a kind of like a rolling basis kind of thing. I will say we've gotten so much enthusiasm for this. It's been awesome and like very reaffirming of like, okay, this is something we should be doing. Like people want to know this and, contribute to this. It's great. But yes, it's kind of like a rolling sort of process. So we're sending out another round of just kind of like our survey this week. And the idea is that we're hoping to line up the case studies first, because as I think I mentioned earlier, we'd like to field match. So have our writers be from broadly like the same field as their case study subjects so that they can offer their own, like more nuanced and deeper understanding of like how this case sort of fits within the research of the fields that it comes from. And also their perspectives as like a future researcher in that field as well.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know this yet, but maybe you've discussed it. What challenges do you anticipate? That there are a lot of moving pieces to this, that what you're doing. It's not easy, right? It's a whole long timeline. what's the biggest challenge that you anticipate, and maybe how are you going to navigate it? If you thought about it.
I think well, I'm kind of like sort of sensing the challenges as we go. So being at the very beginning, I think that the biggest challenge that I have felt right now, which I'm hoping we're about to like have like a huge push in terms of like recruiting and getting the word out. So I'll have a better sense of how big that challenge actually is, honestly, hopefully within the week. But getting the word out is definitely tough. Like in general, you know, like reaching out to like various institutions and finding folks like all over the country and all over the world to be like, hey, here's this tiny little initiative that I promise is really cool and that you should totally care about and take, you know, and spend some time that you probably don't have as a basic scientist to speak to us. That piece has been tricky, but I personally am never fearful of cold emailing people very politely and being a little persistent. So I'm hoping that just from starting to get the word out, you know, within institutions in some of these more targeted ways through like recognized and trusted voices there, that'll help us kind of get that ball rolling.
Yeah. And will you be paying the participants? I'm assuming the science writers, you'll be paying them. Yes. It's an assumption that, like you said, yes.
But yes, certainly case study writers, yes. We are also bringing some folks on for various roles to support the many elements of this project. So I mentioned we'll have virtual programming throughout the duration of it. Certainly editorial support for the case study writers while they're working on their cases, for the manuscript itself. Somebody to serve as a kind of community manager for our cohort for the case study writer program. So also just generally for some of these support roles and for some infrastructure for the project as well. Yeah. We'll be doing that, but certainly, yeah, we believe in paying people for their work.
And a quick one, where's the project, where will it be based? Because you're at the Rockefeller right now. Is that where it will be based?
So, I mean, I'm based here, yes. Okay. But in terms of like the geography of the folks who are contributing as interviewees, so our case subjects and our writers, they can be from anywhere.
I guess my question is, who's the accepting institution that is going to be the host, right? Is it ComSciCon that is accepting the grant?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So this program itself is run by ComSciCon. Yes. Yeah, we're the host organization.
I see. Yeah. But the writers can come from anywhere. I totally get that. Yeah. That makes sense. And the interviews, to make them more accessible, will be done remotely, I'm assuming, as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Again, lots of beautiful moving pieces. You said little project earlier, Emily. I don't think so. I think this is actually a very big undertaking, and I know this because I'm in this, and I can see all the moving pieces in my mind. So,
but the whole thing is you keep the expectations low, and then you're like, and then you surpass them. So
That's right. So I want to end. Man, I wish we could just keep chatting, Emily, and there's so much in here. And I actually love that we're at the beginning of this. I'll keep saying this. We're at the beginning because we don't really get to do this often enough, right? We talk at the beginning of things. Normally we see things at the end. Here's the report, go forth and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
So for my last two questions, the first one is about, in the piece by Carmen, you said, and I quote, in the absence of tailored grants, like what the Kavli Foundation, now the Rita Foundation, is offering, there's not much incentive for this sort of public engagement to take place in basic science research, end quote. How important is it to support projects like this, especially at this time?
I think it was already very important, and now it feels extra important. But yeah, I mean, I think so that note about incentivizing, I should tie back as well. That's also a motivating factor for this project. And that we hope that we can, by also circling back to say, okay, like folks going out to, again, better understand these broader implications and bring them back into their research. Can we capture positive impacts of that? My guess is yes, but I'll knock on wood just in case. But essentially to say, like, there are beneficial reasons to do that kind of work, beyond the fact that, like, yes, like for our research to have better impacts on society, having these conversations earlier and sooner and bringing as many voices to the table as we can, and like the right voices to the table, we'll improve all of that. But at the end of the day, like, if there's not a structure to support this kind of work being done, or something to incentivize it, to say, if you take the steps to do this work, you will be rewarded for doing so. And it might be easier for you to continue doing your research and to support yourself as a researcher. Then it's a much tougher case to make. So we're still trying to, this is a little bit further down the line, trying to suss out how we'll roll out this manuscript. We have been in talks about the possibility of trying to publish it somewhere that basic scientists are already reading for their research. So potentially like a well-known journal, because that also adds both longevity and sustainability to the work, because it's somewhere that folks know, it has a DOI, it's findable. But it also says, hey, like, this work was published in a journal that you care about, that you list on your grants, that you otherwise publish in, and even sort of creating little steps and signals like that can like begin to kind of signal incentivization or establish it. I hope. I don't know, but that's the thinking for that. But in terms of how important this work is, I think it's really important. This is an interesting time to be doing a lot of things in science. So I don't think it's special to say that this is an interesting time to be doing this project. But I am very curious to see, for folks, especially as we're talking to them now, and capturing these cases now, how folks are who have been doing this work, how they're also thinking about it in light of all of the things that have been happening in terms of defunding and restricting scientific research.
Yeah. Emily, you answered my second question already. So you're reading my mind, Unfortunately, we have to end it there. As I mentioned, Emily, you're welcome to come back. In fact, you can come back midway through the program as you guys launch this, right? Because even as we're talking with those writers, for example, as they're going through this, would be fascinating to have them join us here and kind of share kind of an up-to-date, here's what's happening, because again, it keeps everybody else informed, right? Those science communicators who are watching this later, other scientists who are going to be curious, right? Midway, maybe, to even say, I'm eager to get an update on what's going on. We would love to have them. This platform is open for them. Emily Costa, this was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here. And I'd love to come back.